War is mathematics. It's ballistics, trajectory, fuel consumption, and kill radii. It is a cold, hard equation of steel and flesh. But ask any operator who has spent time in the deep bush, in the places where the maps turn into blank grids, and they will tell you that the math doesn't always add up. Sometimes the numbers fail. Sometimes 2 + 2 = 0. And sometimes a man walks out of a fire that should have turned him into ash, guided by something that isn't in the field manual. I am the sentry, and tonight we are going back to the trellis of green hell. We are talking about the golden BB, that one luckless round that finds the gap in the armor. We are talking about a crash that killed everyone, except the one man who had a job left to do.
They were flying nap of the earth, NOE. That means flying fast and low, skimming just feet above the canopy to stay off enemy radar. The jungle below was a blur of emerald violence. Through the headset, the chatter was professional, clipped. 2 minutes out, LZ is hot. Roger, copy hot. Gunners, eyes on the tree line. Thorne gripped his carbine. He felt that familiar vibration in the floorboards, the massive transmission screaming above his head. It's a sound that lulls you into a sense of invincibility. You're in a flying tank. You're the predator. Until you aren't. 03:15. The crash. It happens faster than thought. There is no cinematic slow motion in real life. A flash from the ridgeline, a streak of white smoke. The RPG didn't hit the fuselage, it clipped the tail rotor. Physics took over instantly. The bird entered an unrecoverable spin, the dead man's curve. The world outside the open doors turned into a carousel of green and blue sky. The G-force pinned Thorne to the bulkhead. He heard the chief screaming, "Mayday, Mayday, we are going due." The impact wasn't a thud. It was the sound of the world ending. Metal tearing like paper. The scream of the turbine engine shredding itself. The smell of JP-8 jet fuel instantly filling the air. Then, darkness. 0500, the awakening. Thorne woke up to the sound of dripping fluids and the hiss of cooling metal. He was upside down, still strapped into his seat.
The bird was inverted, smashed through the triple canopy jungle and lodged in the mud like a lawn dart. Pain, white-hot pain radiating from his left shoulder. He fumbled for his release buckle, falling a foot into the muck below. He coughed, the taste of copper and hydraulic fluid in his mouth. "Chief? Miller?" Silence. Thorne crawled through the wreckage. The cockpit was crushed. Holloway and the co-pilot were gone, killed on impact. In the back, the rest of the recon team. I won't describe what he saw. You don't need to know the condition of the bodies. You just need to know that Thorne checked every pulse. Nothing. He was alone, deep in enemy territory. Sector 4, a notorious stronghold for the insurgents they were hunting. And the worst part? The radio was dead. The crash had sheared the antenna and smashed the comm stack. He checked his gear. His rifle was bent. Useless. He pulled his sidearm, a standard issue M9 Beretta, and checked the mags. 2 spare magazines, a combat knife, 1 fragmentation grenade, a broken compass, and a survival radio that was flashing a low battery indicator. Thorne knew the drill. E and E. Escape. And evasion. Get away from the crash site. The enemy would have seen the smoke. They were coming to scavenge the kill. 0720. The first anomaly. Thorne scrambled up a muddy embankment, moving about 50 meters from the burning helicopter. He found a hollow beneath the roots of a massive banyan tree and pressed himself into the mud.
He covered himself with wet leaves, blending in. Minutes later, they arrived. A squad of 12. Irregulars. Militia. Carrying AKs and wearing mismatched fatigues. They weren't looking for survivors to take prisoner. They were looking for trophies. They moved with confidence, laughing, shouting. Thorn watched from the roots. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. If he sneezed, if he shifted his weight, he was dead.
One of the militia fighters stopped. He looked right at the banyan tree. He raised his rifle, squinting into the shadows where Thorn lay. The enemy soldier took a step closer. Thorn tightened his grip on the M9. He was going to take one with him. And then it happened. Thorn felt a pressure in his head. Not a voice exactly, but a sudden, violent impulse. A command that bypassed his ears and went straight to his motor cortex. Don't breathe. Thorn held his breath. His lungs burned. The soldier took another step. He was 5 feet away. He reached out with the barrel of his rifle to push back the hanging vines. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed from the other side of the clearing. A large branch, burned by the crash, snapped and fell 50 yards away. The militia soldier spun around, startled. His commander shouted at him, and the soldier turned away from Thorn, laughing off his nerves, and jogged toward the crash site. Coincidence? Maybe. Physics? Sure. Heat weakens wood. Gravity pulls it down. But for that branch to snap at that exact second, that's the kind of math that makes you believe in miracles. 09:45. The hunt begins. Night fell. The jungle turned into a wall of black ink. Thorn needed to move. He needed to find high ground to try the emergency beacon. But as he moved away from the crash site, a cold rage began to settle in his gut. He saw them looting the bodies of his friends. He saw them celebrating. And he realized something.
The angle of the RPG shot, it had come from a specific ridge to the east, a prepared anti-aircraft position. If a rescue bird came for him, the CSAR team, that same gun would be waiting. Thorn stopped. Survival doctrine says, run, hide, survive. But the voice in his head, that sentry inside him, shifted. It wasn't saying run anymore. It was pulling him, a magnetic pull toward the east, toward the ridge. He wasn't leaving. Not yet. He moved through the jungle like a ghost. He was injured, dehydrated, and outgunned, but he had the darkness. He had the training. 11:30. The voice. This is where the story gets strange. Thorn would later report that he didn't navigate by landmarks. He couldn't see them. The canopy blocked the stars. He navigated by feeling. Every time he was about to cross a game trail, he'd get a spike of nausea. He'd stop, wait, and sure enough, a 2-man enemy patrol would walk past seconds later. It happened 3 times. The 3rd time, he was about to step into a clearing when he heard it, clear as a bell inside his skull. Down. Thorn dropped. A tripwire was strung at chest height, invisible in the dark. It was connected to a crude fragmentation trap. If he had taken one more step, he would have been shredded. He lay there, staring at the thin fishing line glistening faintly in the moonlight, sweating through his camis. He crawled under the wire. He was getting close to the ridge. 13:15. The nest. He found it.
It was a dug-in position on a rocky outcropping overlooking the valley, a DSHK heavy machine gun mounted on a tripod, and a pile of RPGs. There were 6 men there, the reapers of the valley. They were the ones who had killed Widowmaker 2-6. They were relaxed. They had a small fire going. Bad discipline, but they felt safe. They were smoking, talking loudly. Their weapons were leaned against the rocks. Thorn was 1 man with a pistol and 1 grenade. The math was impossible. 6 against 1. Automatic weapons against a sidearm. He lay in the brush, 20 meters out. He needed a distraction. He needed an equalizer. He looked at the DSHK. It was pointed out toward the valley, waiting for the rescue helicopters. Next to the gun was a crate of ammo, and next to the crate, the spare RPG rounds. Thorn formulated a plan. It was suicide, but it was the only play. He unpinned his single fragmentation grenade. He needed to throw it perfectly into the cluster of RPG rounds. If he missed, he was dead. If he hit it, the secondary explosion would wipe the ledge clean. He took a breath. The pain in his shoulder was screaming. Wait. The instinct again. It stopped his hand. He paused. Why wait? Then he heard it. The distant thrum of rotors. The rescue team. They were inbound. The enemy heard it too. They scrambled to the heavy gun. They started slewing the barrel, racking the charging handle. They were getting ready to ambush the rescue bird.
If Thorn had thrown the grenade 5 seconds earlier, they might have been scattered. Now they were clustered around the gun. Now. 15:45. The action. Thorn stood up. He didn't throw from cover. He stood up to ensure the arc was perfect. He lobbed the grenade. "Frag out," he whispered to no one. The spoon flew off. The grenade sailed through the humid air. One of the enemy soldiers saw him. He shouted, raising his AK. Thorn dove sideways as bullets chewed up the vegetation where he had just been standing.
The grenade didn't land on the ground. It landed in the open crate of RPG boosters. The explosion wasn't just a bang. It was a supernova. The frag detonated the propellant in the rockets. A massive fireball engulfed the ledge. The heavy machine gun was tossed into the air like a toy. The shockwave knocked the wind out of Thorn, slamming him back against a tree. Debris rained down, burning metal, rocks, pieces of the enemy. Thorn gasped for air, his ears ringing. He scrambled to his feet, M9 raised. One survivor, the commander. He was burned, stumbling out of the smoke, clutching a sidearm. He saw Thorn. They raised their weapons simultaneously. Thorn didn't think. He didn't aim. He just let the training take over. Double tap. 2 shots rang out. The enemy commander dropped. Thorn stood there, the slide of his Beretta locked back. Empty. 17:20. The complication. The ridge was clear. The anti-aircraft threat was gone. But Thorn was exposed. The explosion had alerted every patrol in a 5-mile radius. He could hear shouting from the valley floor. They were coming up the hill. He grabbed the enemy commander's radio. It was dead. He grabbed his own emergency survival radio. He keyed the mic. Any station, this is Widowmaker 26 actual. I am at the crash site's 3 o'clock high, ridgeline. The AA threat is neutralized. I am hot. I repeat, I am hot. Static. He looked at the radio. The battery light was dead. It had been dead for hours.
He clicked it frantically. Nothing. No hiss. No static. Just a brick of plastic. He realized then that he had been talking to himself. No one was coming for him. The rescue bird he heard earlier? It must have turned back. Or he had imagined it. He was alone on a burning ridge with an army coming up the hill to kill him. 1845. The climax. Thorn sat down against the rocks. He picked up an AK-47 from a fallen enemy. Checked the mag. Half full. "All right," he said to the jungle. "Let's do this." He watched the tree line. The shadows were moving. They were here. He put the rifle to his shoulder. And then, the sky split open. Brrr. The terrifying, ripping sound of a GAU-8 Avenger cannon. An A-10 Warthog roared overhead, so low the jet wash nearly blew Thorn off the ledge. Tracers the size of beer bottles slammed into the jungle below the ridge, decimating the advancing enemy force. The earth shook. Trees were sawed in half. Then, a voice crackled. Not in his head,
but from the dead radio in his hand. Widowmaker 2-6, this is Hog 1-1. We have you visual on the ridge. Good effect on target with that secondary explosion. That was a hell of a smoke signal, brother. Keep your head down. Drustoff is 30 seconds out. Thorne stared at the radio. The display was blank. No power. Hog 1-1, how do you copy me? My radio is dead. Say again, Widowmaker? You're coming in 5x5. Clear signal. Thorne looked at the battery compartment.
It was corroded. The contacts were snapped. There was physically no way this radio could transmit. Copy, Thorne whispered. Just get me out of here. 2015. The extraction. The rescue Pavehawk swooped in, hovering just feet above the shattered rock. The prop wash kicked up the embers of the AA site. PJs, pararescuemen, leaped out, weapons raised. They grabbed Thorne, hauling him into the bird. "Anyone else?" the lead PJ yelled over the rotor noise. Thorne looked back at the burning ridge. He looked at the crater where the AA gun used to be. He looked at the jungle that had tried to eat him alive. "Just me," Thorne said. As the bird banked away, climbing towards the safety of the clouds, Thorne looked down at the hand that was gripping the safety strap. He was still holding the dead radio. He watched the jungle fade into the darkness. 2137. The resolution. Back at base, the debrief was confusing. The intel officers played back the tapes. They had a recording of Thorne calling in the airstrike. They had a recording of him giving coordinates. But when the comms tech inspected Thorne's survival radio, he just shook his head. "This thing is toast, Sergeant," the tech said. "The internal crystals are shattered. The battery is 2 years expired. This is a paperweight. It couldn't transmit a signal across a room, let alone to an aircraft at 10,000 feet." Thorne didn't argue. He didn't try to explain the voice that told him to duck.
He didn't explain the tripwire he shouldn't have seen. He just took the radio back. He kept it. The official report stated that Sergeant Elias Thorne survived due to exceptional fieldcraft and tactical ingenuity. They credited the explosion of the RPG cache as a visual marker that alerted the A-10 pilots. They chalked the radio communications up to atmospheric anomalies or cross-chatter from another unit. But soldiers know better.
There is a rule in the jungle. When you are alone, when you are out of options, and when the darkness closes in, you are never truly by yourself. There is a sentinel that watches the line between the living and the dead. Thorne went back to the States. He never flew another mission. He keeps that broken radio on his mantle. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, he swears static comes through the speaker. War is mathematics, they say, but survival is a miracle. Stay frosty, watch your sectors, and trust your gut. It might be the only thing keeping you alive. This is the Sentry, signing off.